Hi there folks, this is Johnny again and welcome to my review of this Schecter, what was it again, Diamond Series Banshee Extreme 6 Flight Rose Edition, something or other. So first of all, let's talk about the first out of the box experience with this guitar. So the neck was pretty much set up perfectly. I didn't have to touch this truss rod at all. The intonation needed a little bit of work, and the strings that were on the guitar were Ernie balls, and I guess they have been on there for a couple of weeks or something, and they were a little bit sticky, so those had to be changed out for my strings of choice, which are Elixir's NanoWeb 9-46. Out of tune again, we'll get into that later. And also one or the other screw around here and around the tuners needed a little bit of tightening. Also the bolts back here around the tuners. Otherwise, it was pretty much in tip-top shape. I mean, just look at it. It's a little bit smudgy from me handling it so much. Excuse me, I hope this doesn't come across on the video. So let's get into some pros. This guitar sets up really, really well. I can get the string action down to 1 millimeter, even a little bit lower than that. There might be a little bit of buzzing coming in, but no dead notes. And that's the most important thing. Fret buzz, I personally can deal with, as long as it's not excessive, but otherwise, once this is also set up, it plays so well. So effortless. Also, the sound is great. I think these pickups are some of the better stock pickups, definitely. And I don't feel any need to change them out anytime soon. The neck pickup sounds nice and rich and bright, like you expect from a signal coil. This is definitely the better way to go if you want to have a single coil sound than going with splitting a humbucker. I had guitars that could split the humbuckers, and it's just not the same than having an actual single coil in here. It sounds so much richer and livelier than a split humbucker, in my opinion at least. Also the bridge pickup, finally the first time that a bridge pickup actually sounded good on clean tones, at least for me personally. I always find that bridge pickups sound very nasally on clean tones, but this one seems to be a bit more on the brighter side than mid-rangey side, which makes for a very nice, snappy and crunchy clean tone. And also for leads, it works very well. What's also cool is that the bridge pickup is splittable in case you want to have the single coil going on. That's just a neat little addition to this whole thing. So it gives you a lot of options for sounds. What I personally also really like about this guitar is the general design. It takes a classic design but puts it into a modern context. For example, the cutaway here is really large, so the fret access is beautiful. And also all the edges and the horns themselves, they don't have this very rounded and kind of poofy look, if you will. But this has a very nice, sharp, snappy design to it and snappy feel to it. I really like it. Also, the neck is, I would say it's a kind of a medium thickness. It's not razor thin like an Ibanez Wizard neck, and it's also not a baseball bat. It feels very comfortable. So really, all in all, just great guitar. Just look at it. Isn't this is probably the most beautiful guitar I ever owned. But now let's come to the cons, of which there may be quite some, but in the end, I will still highly recommend this guitar. So don't let the whole list of cons deter you. Okay, let's run through them again step by step. First of all, tuning stability is not that great, especially with this Floyd Bros. I'll get into some details about Floyd Bros. A little bit of the rant coming, so beware. When you just work with this guitar at home or in your home studio, the tuning stability is fine. No real problems there. But when you take it around a lot, then you may run into trouble. I like to take this along on guitar lessons, so having it in the car for half an hour to drive to the school already detunes it a little bit. And then during the day, during the lessons, I notice I constantly need to retweak the tuning. So it may be something you want to watch out for. The tuners up here are not very precise, so when you put on new strings and you want to get the tuning just right before you clamp down the strings, it requires a little bit of patience. The nut here is like 0.5 millimeter wider than the actual neck at this spot. It's not something that hinders playability or tone in any way, it's just something I noticed. Now the frets up here, they're not sharp in any way, but you do feel them. Again, it's not really something that hinders your playability, it's just, again, something I noticed. I'm personally not bothered by this at all, still feels great. Now when it comes to these single coils here, I do wish that these pole pieces were not staggered. You see, with the staggered pole pieces, then each one under each string is a little bit higher because of the radius of the neck and therefore also the radius of the strings. The thing is, the radius I think is too flat for staggered poles. And because of that, you can actually kind of hear how the G string, for example, is quite a bit louder than the B string. It's not just because of, well, the dimensions of the strings and their thickness. You also notice it in the playing that the G string just kind of has this tendency to poke out. So now to the Floyd Rose. Okay, just all in all, I think this is a very outdated design, and Floyd Rose needs to up their game. I mean, Ibanez is doing much better bridges than Floyd Rose, in my humble opinion. They have been really good, and the first that did it really well, what they did at their time, like back in the 80s and early 90s. But come on, guys, it's time to develop your design a little bit. For example, setting up the intonation is a huge pain. These clamping screws that hold the saddle in place are directly beneath the strings and not a little bit offset to the side. That means when you want to set the intonation of a string, you need to loosen it all the way so you can actually reach the screw and then loosen the screw. And also there's no screw on the saddle to kind of fine-tune the intonation. You actually have to grab it back here and just shove it back and forth. And then tighten up the screw again, tune the string, check the intonation. If the intonation is still not good, rinse and repeat. And that for every string. It takes a long time. Ibanez's bridges are far better in that way. These clamping screws are offset, so you can actually reach them without having to loosen up the string all the way. And there are extra screw holes, something or other to really fine-tune the intonation. It's just way better. Also, these fine tuners here, I think they aren't machined very well. They feel very rough when you turn them, and even when you turn one tuner, at some spots it's a little bit harder to turn, and then it just slips right through. Kind of off, if you ask me. Today's standard should be better. Okay, we have the technology, people. Use it. So next, the tremolo arm. The only way to fasten it is with a tiny little screw back here. So when you fasten it, then, well, the arm doesn't fall out, but it also kind of set in place. I mean, you can move it around, sure, but if you want to have the tremolo arm just dangling around, then you also run the risk of it just falling out, because it's not fastened. There's just really this one screw mechanism for this. Modern tremolos have two mechanisms to it. One that holds the arm inside of the tremolo, and another one that can tighten the arm to a position, or leave it loose, if you will. But this doesn't have that. Again, in my opinion, outdated design. Of course, also tuning the guitar, being a floating tremolo, takes a long time. It's just something you gotta be aware when having a Floyd Rose. It comes with a lot of shortcomings, sadly. And again, on a more personal note, about the design, again, I think these fine tuners, they're kind of placed too high. Again, modern designs have a much lower profile. Because of that, if you want to work with palm muting and whatnot, it could happen that you hit these fine tuners. It could happen that you accidentally detune the low E string or something. Again, just keep that in mind. I personally would prefer a much lower profile in this. Last point about the Floyd Rose, and this is really the worst thing about this guitar. These screws back here that clamp down on the string to hold it in place inside the saddle, they loosen over time. And that is terrible. I've noticed this because my high E string kept going lower and lower, so I had to, of course, use the fine tuner to compensate, and the fine tuner would also go lower and lower in its position. And I thought, something is wrong here. Why does this string keep tuning lower and lower? And then at some point, I just did my bending, and bam, it snapped out of the saddle. I had to place it back in, screw it down again, and I checked all the other screws and they were noticeably looser. I usually clamp them down really good until it doesn't turn anymore to really keep it in place. But that is definitely not reliable, and it's annoying. Like every couple of days you need to check the screws that they are still fastened enough. And that's pretty much it. I know that sounds like a lot. It's more of a rant about Floyd Roses than this guitar. This guitar in general is awesome. It looks awesome. It plays awesome. It sounds awesome. It feels awesome. Just I can very much recommend it. Just beware of the Floyd Rose, okay? I'm personally already thinking about switching this out to an Ibanez Low Pro Edge, though I still need to check the dimensions that it actually perfectly fits in here. And I may also install something like a Tremory back here to keep the tuning more stable. So if you're thinking about getting this guitar, just keep in mind you may need to upgrade something about the bridge to keep things a bit more stable. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it, and you know how YouTube works. Comment, like, subscribe, all the whole diddly do, and I shall see you next time.